guys, welcome back to Telltale. I'm Emily,
I'm Greg.
and we are going to be discussing Rosemary's Baby.
Yes, welcome to Halloween.
We did a spooky season one. This is per my request, and that's by Ira Levin.
Mm-hmm.
Levine, right?
Yes.
I never remember to say it Levine. I always say it Levin for some reason.
Okay. It's Jewish, so it's Levine, I'm pretty
Levine.
sure.
All right.
Pretty sure.
If you know how to pronounce it, let us know, because I've only ever read it.
But to the best of my knowledge, he didn't write a whole lot.
Mm-mm.
But most of his books were made into movies.
Mm-hmm.
A
That I
Kiss,
did
A
know.
Kiss Before Dying,
Yep.
Rosemary's Baby, of
Mm-hmm.
course, The Stepford Wives, Boys from Brazil, and Sliver were all made into movies. And I think Son of Rosemary was just done as a movie too.
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe.
I thought I heard where that was done. But anyway, Rosemary's Baby, I've got that as his third work,
Mm-hmm.
published in 1967 by Random House. And my copy isn't very good.
That's a bummer.
It's a book club edition that came with no book jacket.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got it for 50 cents at St. Vincent de Paul.
Mm-hmm.
There are some beautiful editions, like Suntup did a
Mm-hmm.
Rosemary's Baby that's super expensive and really beautiful and lavishly illustrated. But um, so if you haven't heard of Rosemary's Baby, what rock have you been under?
Yeah, it is a cult
Otherwise,
classic.
you must have heard of Boys from Brazil or the Stepford Wives. I mean, Stepford Wives in particular
It's had
is that's
two versions made, right?
that's a phrase. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a phrase that has entered popular
Yeah,
um,
pop
culture
culture, yeah.
language.
Mm-hmm.
A Stepford wife. It's just it's part of the cult. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
our society now.
Yeah,
It's that
it's a
famous,
household name.
and so is Rosemary's Baby,
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah.
pretty much. And so synopsis.
Rosemary and Guy, her husband, finally get an apartment in the building that they really wanted to get into. But the apartment building has a dark history.
Hmm.
But no matter, they love it anyway. They move in, they meet their quirky neighbors, and one day, Rosemary gets pregnant. So, bare bones synopsis: Rosemary has Satan's baby. Spoiler alert.
I think everybody knows that part.
Yeah, pretty much. But what is interesting is the roundabout way in which she finds out and how it all happens.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, her husband, Guy, is an actor, wants to see his career take off. The neighbors dabble in the occult. They conspire, saying, hey, if you give us your wife to have Satan's baby for our witchy occult shit, you will be provided with a successful career and all the fame and fortune you want.
Yeah.
And so this conspiracy surrounding poor Rosemary and her pregnancy occurs. And she is piecing it together bit by bit with the help of her friend who ends up having an unfortunate accident
Mm-hmm.
um and passing away, has helped her piece together all of the components to help her figure out that there is a conspiracy surrounding her and her child.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the unfolding of the story. There's a lot of trigger warnings.
Yeah.
She gets raped by Satan,
Mm-hmm.
and then because she wakes up from a fever dream state where she wasn't sure what happened to her really happened,
Because she was drugged.
because she was drugged, her husband tells her he basically raped her. So, trigger warning on that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, some body horror here.
Mm-hmm.
Because pregnancy is not pretty.
No.
um, so if
And
you,
this one in particular, she
yeah,
gets sick.
she gets very sick in this one. So there's some body horror in this. And of course, there is a lot of emotional trauma in this story as well.
Mm-hmm.
Questioning relationships with other humans, questioning relationships with family, the isolation aspect of things, questioning her relationship with her own husband,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. It's very interesting from a
Yeah.
social standpoint.
Yeah.
So yeah, just kind of go into it knowing that there are some very traumatic, triggery things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of gaslighting
Mm-hmm.
in this one, but this is a really, I liked it. I don't want to say it's a top tale,
Yeah.
but it definitely was an interesting story, especially from a female perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I agree with you that
Mhm.
I enjoyed it, but it's not a top tail.
Yeah.
This is one where the hype makes it much
Yes.
bigger
Yeah.
than it is. And I mean, if we could go back to 1967, we'd probably see where this novel was kind of breakthrough because there was nothing, at least not majorly published like this before
Mm-hmm.
that. The
Yes.
Exorcist came after this.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen King was entirely after this. All the 1980s horror revival came after this. It all followed this book.
Mm-hmm.
And before this book, there was horror published, but a lot of it was chased by obscenity laws,
Mm-hmm.
the more extreme stuff. The other stuff was just ghost stories
Mm-hmm.
or Lovecraft type
Yeah.
stuff.
Supernatural
Um,
kind of things or paranormal things.
you really didn't have, you really, when you had demon stories, it was more
Mm-hmm.
of the deal with the devil type of
Mm-hmm.
Twilight Zone episode
Yeah.
where the devil is shown as this funny character and
Mm-hmm.
the main character does a deal with him and gets screwed over by the devil.
Yeah.
Um, Mostly done with humor. You never really got this what and I don't know if it existed before this book, this vision of Satan and devils and demons that we
Mm-hmm.
live with today of the kind of exorcist kind
Mm-hmm.
of devil story,
Yeah.
demon story, Amityville horror. That all
Mm-hmm.
comes after this.
Mm-hmm.
Before this, demons were not like this. Devils
Mm-hmm.
were not like this. Satan wasn't presented like this.
Yeah.
This is the first one that made it seem like a
It
real
was something
world
worth
thing.
taking seriously. Yeah.
So it's an important book in that way because it did do something that no other horror novel had done before.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about that I find about this novel, um, wouldn't give it top tail status because it just it seemed short.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed slight.
Mm-hmm. It
It
feels more
seemed
like a slice of life story.
it seemed too easy to
Mm-hmm.
read. Um, I would call this, as far as the writing in this story, I would call it young adult if there wasn't all this sex and violence going
Yeah.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was so easy reading.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a deep book in
Mm-mm.
that way, but yet it does in the end call up some really deep ideas about
Mm-hmm.
motherhood.
Yes. That's the
If
thing.
if I can spoil the end, the spoiler coming, if you haven't read it, go read it and come back. Um, in the end, once Rosemary has gone through all this and come to the realization of what really happened and what she's dealing with, and she's holding her son with tails and horns
Yeah.
and claws.
Yeah. Definitely
she
not human.
she doesn't like it. She's horrified by it, but she is its mother,
Yeah.
and that's stronger than anything else. And so she
Mm-hmm.
accepts the child,
Mm-hmm.
kind of making a statement about motherhood
Yes.
and what motherhood is really all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That's the thing I found very interesting about this book is that it's so distinctly feminine issues.
Hmm.
It's you deal with the first one basically being a woman who has to rely on the livelihood of her husband
Hmm.
because her working was not an option.
Yeah.
The unique female issue of she chose to leave the Catholic faith and marry a Protestant,
Hmm.
and the isolation she experienced from her family because of it.
Hmm.
I won't say that's a uniquely female issue, but it is an issue that I think women are more emotionally affected by is that rejection by their family.
Yeah.
Especially because circumstances often worked against women. The rape issue by her own husband, which
Hmm.
in this when this was written, husbands were allowed to rape their wives
Yes.
without legal um consequence
Mm-hmm.
until 1991 or 2 in the 90s. It wasn't until the 90s that that became illegal.
Okay.
So dealing with that betrayal, but
Mm-hmm.
knowing there's not much she can do about it and it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Then the betrayal of being isolated further from her friend group because the neighbors are so overbearing and she got so sick from her pregnancy that she couldn't confide in her friends who were also females who had had children and build that sense of uniquely woman and motherhood friendship and community.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the issues of having intergenerational friends
Mm-hmm.
who act as father figures and
Yeah.
how important that was to her, and then to lose that father figure in Hutch
Mm-hmm.
because he ended up having an accident.
Yeah.
Um, the weight of being married to a famous person and having a husband who is so involved in his work that you don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
The importance of being able to nest and make a home your own
Mm-hmm.
is brought up. You have the unique feminine, just the experience of pregnancy. Hers was really rough and she got really sick.
Yeah.
And throughout it, she's, the unique issue of women's medical not being taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, that pain will stop eventually, but she's had it for six months.
Yeah,
You
that
know?
was an interesting part. Yeah, because
Yes.
everybody around her is saying, "Oh, that's normal. I went through that," and and all this other stuff,
Hmm.
and it's like they don't know what she's feeling.
Yeah.
They don't know
The
what's happening.
doctor is the one who's telling her it's normal, and
Yeah,
her neighbors are telling her
but
it's
the
normal.
doctor's in cahoots with her.
Yeah, with the neighbors, it's her female friends the one night she finally gets to hang out with them because she's fed up with being so isolated, who are
Mhm.
finally like, that is absolutely not normal.
Yeah.
Sounds very intentional that your doctor's trying to isolate you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the doctor had said things like, don't listen to your friends and how their pregnancies went, because everybody's pregnancy is different.
Yeah.
And like his treatment of her is so different based off of all these other women, and all these other women, while their pregnancies were different, were all treated the same by the
Mm-hmm.
same doctor.
Yeah, but we've seen
Mhm.
like in the yellow wallpaper how
Yes.
women have had that problem of they know what's wrong, that there's something wrong with their bodies, but
Yes.
people won't believe them. People won't listen to them
Yes, they
about it.
don't trust women to know their own body.
Hmm.
And medical science has not taken time to actually start researching women's bodies
Yeah,
until the 90s again.
right.
That's when they started including women in medical trials for medications.
Hmm.
It wasn't done before that,
Yeah.
which is just blows my freaking mind.
Well, and I think it was in the 50s, the Masters study was the first to really look at both sexes and
Hmm.
start doing a study and collecting data about
Yeah,
the
and being like,
differences.
"Hey, maybe this won't affect people the same way," and it's the start one that starts suggesting it, but it wasn't taken seriously
Yeah,
until 40 years later,
right.
which is ridiculous to me.
Hmm.
But there's all these very unique women's issues.
Hmm.
And even like the frenemy situation, the social aspect of that frenemy with her and the neighbor,
Hmm.
who's, part one of the occultists,
Yeah.
and how involved she is in her life. And how much she tries to like have this frenemy situation where she's trying to be friendly and come across as just a motherly type,
Hmm.
but she's really working against her
Yeah.
and forcing a situation for her own gratification
Hmm.
as an occultist and as a witch.
Hmm.
So it's just really interesting that it delves into so many distinctly female social issues
Yeah.
and does it so well from a female's perspective, despite being written by a man.
Hmm.
Like, this guy paid attention. Like,
Did
he
his
saw
homework.
women's plights and was like, well, shit, let's just throw it all in this story
Hmm.
kind of thing. And the gaslighting from everyone, including her husband, the emotional abuse he put her through in a
Yeah.
lot of cases for his own gratification, and the narcissism she experienced at his hand.
Hmm.
I wish I could say that's a unique situation. It's not.
Yeah.
I know so many women who have been married and divorced from very narcissistic men and very mentally ill men and very workaholic men.
Right.
And it's just really interesting to see all of that come together in this horror story in such a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So he really did pay attention and really
Yeah.
like sought out women's issues
Mm-hmm.
as he was writing this, especially in the context of the body horror itself of pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Like pregnancy itself is, yeah, a natural thing, but it is still body horror.
Mm-hmm.
It is an experience that deforms women and is
Yeah.
painful and is dangerous.
Yeah.
So just adding all of this together makes it so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very much slice of life, but still so distinctly female horror. And I think that's really interesting a lot.
Yeah. But I ended the book wishing he would have just put the pedal to the metal on all of that
Mm-hmm.
and m- dive in deeper into all those issues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe in 1967, his editors were telling him he couldn't, and he
Yeah.
wanted to actually publish it. Um, but then there's Riders of the Purple Wage got published. You
Yeah.
know, uh, it just because he didn't, because he held back, it makes the book seem thin
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
like it. I just wanted more.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be more powerful.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's another distinct female issue as well. One of the most fascinating studies that has ever been done, in my opinion, is the emotional and mental health and lives of men versus women after they get married. You see an improvement in men where they become more productive at work. They tend to have better mental health. They tend to be generally happier, less depression. They if they're in school, they tend to do better in school if they're married versus if they're not. Women, total opposite.
Really.
Yes, women are more prone to being depressed. They are more prone to isolation and being away from friends. They are more prone from being dragged away from their families and isolating even further. They end up having more cases of depression, higher rate of suicide, higher rate of all kinds of mental health issues developing after they get married. And so I think that's really interesting and a very fascinating study because that's kind of what we're seeing happening to Rosemary. She
Yeah.
feels cardboard
Hmm.
because after her marriage, she became cardboard.
Yeah.
She lost everything. She lost a sense of self. She lost her faith. She lost her family. They moved, so she lost a lot of friends. And then the friends she did make, she lost them because she got sick during her pregnancy. And then the community around her, she didn't have a strong connection with because she was constantly either annoyed by them or suspicious of them.
Hmm.
So she's lost herself
Hmm.
entirely.
Yeah.
And then the added issues of being taken advantage of by Satan and her husband, allegedly,
Hmm.
kind of situation.
Hmm.
You just keep feeling like you're owned by everyone else
Yeah.
and never have a sense of self ownership.
Okay.
And I think that's what she's experiencing. I think he was very intentional about making her seem hollow
Hmm.
because she was. Everything was ripped away from her.
Yeah.
Anything that she could have was ripped away from her.
Hmm.
So, yes, I do agree. It does feel hollow, but I felt like that was an intentional thing.
Okay.
But yeah, but yeah, not top tail material. I think we are running into that same issue too, like we
Yeah.
did with Good Omens.
It's overhyped. I mean, and that's the fault of the movie. The movie
Mm-hmm.
was great, done by a great director,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what made the novel so famous.
Yes. Was the
And
film.
the novel is just you expect more,
Yeah. It's a good
and
story. It's entertaining. It's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
It's
it's
not.
definitely enjoyable. It's
Yeah.
definitely a good book. I
Mm-hmm.
would recommend it to people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
except that I mean, looking back at it from where we're at today, we've been through Stephen King and Dean Koontz and all kinds of, you know, much more extreme horror. We've had The Exorcist, we've had Jaws, we've had, just so much that went so much farther than this book.
Mm-hmm.
And so then having read some of that and then come to this book, it's not as impactful as
No.
what we're used to today.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, if you could be in 1967 reading this for the first time with the horror fiction that existed at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had Richard Matheson, you had Shirley Jackson, not a whole lot of anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
On the cusp of satanic panic.
yeah, well, you also had Polwin
Mm-hmm.
and Lovecraft, but I mean, nothing like this
Yeah.
existed, and
Yeah.
so it probably had a huge impact
Mm-hmm.
upon being printed,
Yeah.
and probably was seeming to people, wow, this is so cool. We've
Mm-hmm.
never read
So
anything like
different.
this,
Mm-hmm.
but I still feel like the writing style,
It's
you
too
compare
simple.
it you compare it to Philip Jose Farmer, you compare it to Harlan Ellison,
Mm-hmm.
compare it to Ursula Le Guin and her Earthsea stories, which were written around that time.
Mm-hmm.
um, the writing isn't as good. It's
No.
it's too much simple bestseller material,
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree with that.
and
It is
that's
not a sophisticated high literature piece.
and that's
Mm.
Bradbury,
Yeah.
and that's where Levine
No one
could have.
could be Bradbury though.
Well, no,
Yeah.
Bradbury was good at what he did, but he
Yes.
did one thing well,
Yeah.
and did it in a lot of different iterations. It was still always basically that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he was an amazing writer
Yeah.
as far as his
He
wordsmithing, and
crafted.
there's certainly, I mean, Le Guin was every bit as good as him.
Yes. They're
Lovecraft was as
they were
good as
craftsmen
him.
of the word.
Philip was a farmer was as good as him. I mean, there were other writers that could do that,
Mm-hmm.
but Levine was not that kind of a writer.
No. But I also think there's something to be said about that kind of writer because that does make good stories accessible too. So we
Mhm.
can't like poo-poo on it too much. But yeah,
No,
it's good and enjoyable. And it
yeah,
serves its purpose for what it is.
yeah,
That's all I have to say about that,
okay.
personally. Anything else for you?
That's very um, what's his name? Tom Hanks.
And that's all I have to say
Yeah,
about that. Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
Yeah,
I just
that's where I
every
picked that
time you
up
say
from.
that,
Yeah, that's
I keep
absolutely where
hearing
I
that.
picked that up from is Forrest Gump. And that's well, as an ADHD woman, sometimes the conversation is just done and you don't know what else to say. So it's a
Mhm.
great way to conclude. Just like, and that's all I have to say about that.
But you
And
need a
you walk
box of
away.
chocolates.
Yeah. I could use a box of chocolates right now. After reading Rosemary's Baby, having cravings
Oh no.
for some bonbons. No, I'm kidding. So yeah.
Yes.
Have you read Rosemary's Baby? What did you think? I actually cheated on this one. I didn't actually read a book version of it. I had an audio.
Audiobook.
I had an audio book.
Shame.
I had to do so much driving.
Shame.
No.
No.
But it was done by Mia Farrow, so it was very enjoyable.
Oh, yeah.
That made it very nice, especially because
Audiobooks are books. Just because
yeah,
you're listening rather than looking,
yeah.
it doesn't change anything.
I feel like you are investing in the ancient tradition of oral history and
Exactly.
oral storytelling
Mm-hmm.
when you listen to an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same content. It was very enjoyable. I got mine off Libro to support my local indie bookshop.
Cool.
Um, so it was really nice to be able to have that, especially because I was so busy. I was doing a lot of driving around the county. So it was nice to be able to just pop that on and in between drives be able to listen to it and get through the book. So
Hmm.
it was a lovely read. So shameless plug for the audiobook as read by Mia Farrow. That was very nice.
Very good.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, guys. Like, subscribe, comment your thoughts on Rosemary's Baby, pregnancy, motherhood, body horror, all the things that this touches on. So interesting. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.